When I come to your city, I'm a new score. Broke your high score soon as I step through the door. Tryna stack my paper up like a bookstore. Money kissing each other like a rock and roll tour. When I come to your city, I'm a new score. Broke your high score soon as I step through the door. Tryna stack my paper up like a bookstore. Money kissing each other like a rock and roll tour.
Hey, Tyler.
Hey, Piet. What's up, brother?
Going on? Welcome to the New Score podcast. My name is Pat. This is my co-host, TYG, Tyler Pratt. Tyler, how we be doing?
What we be doing? Crazy night last night, so I'm a bit hungover today. So I apologize if my brain.
Well, eh?
No, my brain's a little mush. If I got Fadaya brain, fucking forgive me.
What were we consuming?
All IPA, some shots. So actually, Lunkenheimer's right down in Weedsport. They had this. It was like park and ride. Lunkenheimer's at this park and ride at 8%. Had a few of those. We were there from 5:30 till 9 when they closed. Then we went over to the classic hole in the wall CJ's. From there I was drinking it was either Big Ditch or Fiddlehead, one of the two. Just more IPAs. And then we had some shots of Buffalo Trace. And then I got the JMO flowing a little bit, did a couple picklebacks. Yeah, dude. Good to see everyone though. All the boys. Hutter came out. Tucker. Who the fuck else? Walton was there.
Smash.
Dude, Cody Babiars, of course, the man of the hour. Yeah. Ashby. And even like Steph Leon, Michaela, who I haven't seen them in a long time either. They were out, so it was good. And Austin's parents, of course. Karen and Jeff. They're great people. Yeah.
Damn, I was missing out. It sounds like a blast.
Yeah, quite the night.
Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank y'all for joining us. Episode 20. Today we got some NFL free agency. We got some NFL trades to talk about, some NFL retirements to talk about, very sadly. And then we're also going to get into a recap of the NHL trade deadline. We're going to check in with our hockey guru, Adam Rude, here in a bit, talk about this past week in the NHL, anything that he's seen. But yeah, I mean, it's good to be back, Tyler. I'm ready to talk some football because we got the draft coming up. We had a crazy week of free agency, some shocking transactions that occurred, and I've been waiting to talk about it, so I'm ready to dive in. Let's get Todd on the horn ASAP, Rocky. Joining us now to talk some NFL free agency, our good friend Todd Albrecht. Todd, how we doing?
Doing good.
Great to see you. Appreciate you coming on. There's a lot to go through this past week in the NFL. It's been exciting. It's been a lot of surprises. Let's dive into it. Let's start out with the AFC East. Just kind of going to give like a general rundown team by team and then give you guys a chance to state what you think about some moves that some of these teams are making. We'll start off with the AFC East. Buffalo Bills. So the Bills had to make a bunch of cuts, obviously, because Josh Allen's contract really started to kick in this offseason. It was going to be $47 million against the cap. So any team in the league, given a quarterback that, you're going to have to see some of these cuts to these players. We've seen Mitch Morse get cut, Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, just a few to name. They did restructure Allen's contract. Von Miller took a pay cut, which was big because he was going to get cut if he didn't otherwise. So I think that was big for him to do that. And then obviously them restructuring Josh Allen is now giving them the opportunity to do some things. They signed Trubisky, brought him back to Buffalo. They signed Matt Collins, who's a player I've really liked throughout his career, but he didn't get anything done in Atlanta simply because Desmond Ridder and that offense couldn't get anything going to the receivers. Curtis Samuel, I thought, was very interesting from the Buffalo Bills because I feel like they lost Gabe Davis. And I felt like, if anything, they needed a deep threat on that offense. Shakir's kind of like that slot guy. And Samuel, I see the same kind of player, and a player that you could put in the backfield, come out of the backfield. But then you have James Cook for that. So it was really weird for them. They gave him 3 years, $30 million. I thought that was a really curious decision by the Bills. They brought Deion Dawkins back, which was big. They brought David Edwards back, which was big. But again, they lost Mitch Morse. Epenesa's coming back, and then they signed Nicholas Morrow, who I thought stunk for the Eagles last year. Brought Taylor Rapp back. So a lot going on in Buffalo. I think going into the draft, it's going to be important for them to get a wide receiver and a corner, because they also lost Dane Jackson in addition to Tre'Davious White. So those are some moves I think about the Bills. Any quick thoughts on the Bills?
I think this is where, you see this process with the teams, they build it up. And this is where Brandon Beane, or your GM, really needs to do the hard stuff, building that team. Yeah, that's hard. I get it. But now all of a sudden the contracts start catching up with you. And, where do you allocate your funds? And I don't know. Curtis Samuel, I think I'm a little higher on him than you were, Pat, because I think he does offer some versatility. But yeah, the Bills, this is a tough spot to be in. And man, they started making cuts, and it was like they got some work ahead of them. But all in all, I think they've done a fair job. We'll see how it pans out. But this is where you got to make the draft picks count, get some, contracts that are manageable back in the team again.
Kind of running through the rest of the division as a whole, because I thought Buffalo, out of the rest of that division, I thought was the most interesting. Miami didn't really do much, and they weren't able to bring anything in because they got to pay Tua. So I'm not going to talk too much about what the Dolphins did. They did bring in Shaq Barrett, Kendall Fuller, Jordan Poyer. I mean, players that have had good careers, but how good of players are they right now at this point in their career is where I'm at with those guys. I want to talk about Miami, though, because they had to let all these guys go. They lose Christian Wilkins, and I think that's just massive. I think he was the heart and soul of that team, and him not being there is going to shake things up a lot. And then also they had to get rid of X at corner, so they're going to have to do something to replace him. They're paying Jalen Ramsey all this money. They're paying Tyreek Hill all this money. Now they're going to have to pay Tua all this money. They're going to have to pay Waddle all this money. And to me, guys, I thought this was a sleeper team. Call me crazy. I thought this was a sleeper team this offseason for Russell Wilson, because are you really committing yourself to Tua? Do you think he can carry you? He couldn't carry you with a loaded roster, and now you want him to carry you with a roster that's not going to be as competitive, because they're not going to be able to pay all these guys coming in. I'm just not there on Tua. I thought this would have been a moment for the Miami Dolphins to make a statement, trade Tua when his value's up before you have to pay him, to a desperate team out there that would say, yeah, we'll bring him in and we'll pay him. And then you get Russell Wilson cheap. You don't have to pay him. You're telling me Russell Wilson can't execute in Mike McDaniel's offense with those weapons? I think he could. And by only paying him 1.5 mil, whatever the Steelers are paying him, I thought that would have been, a really bold move that the Miami Dolphins could have made, and I think they should have made it. Call me crazy. I don't know. Moving on to the New England Patriots. They trade Mac Jones to the Jacksonville Jaguars. His era is over. He stinks. We don't have to watch him anymore. Thank God. Bring Jacoby Brissett back. Who knows what's going to happen there? You would imagine that New England's still going to take a quarterback at 3, But Todd, I know you've heard some rumblings about maybe Minnesota trading up to that pick. Is New England willing to step back in the draft? That's something we could discuss. They brought in Antonio Gibson. They signed Kendrick Bourne. Re-signed Jalen Reagor. That's interesting. Re-signed Hunter Henry. So they're bringing these guys back, and then they get Austin Hooper. And I thought Kyle Duggar getting the transition tag was big for him because I like him a lot. I don't think they could have afforded to lose him. Patriots we're going to be talking a lot about them coming up with the draft coming up. Right now, there's not too much that's really intriguing me there. The Jets, I thought the Jets made a bold statement, and they said number one priority is going to be protecting Aaron Rodgers going next season. And they went all out in the offensive line. They got Morgan Moses. They get Tyron Smith. They get John Simpson. 3 moves that really tell you, hey, our focus is going to be protect A-Rod. We feel like the rest of our roster is at a point right now where we can win. We just need a healthy Aaron Rodgers. And by, investing in that offensive line, that gives them a chance to do that. So I thought that was big for the New York Jets. Todd, takeaways about the rest of the AFC East.
I mean, the 2 that stood out to me were Buffalo for sure because of what they had to do, and just New England. They're kind of in a no man's land in a way. I mean, I do see them almost in a forced trade back unless they really absolutely have conviction over whoever's there at quarterback when they pick, because if they have other guys graded like a A and a B, they need picks. They need the depth of this first couple rounds of this draft to really come through for them, because they don't have a lot right now.
Kind of like Todd mentioned, New England being in the no man's land, they have a lot of work to do. Buffalo, having Josh Allen, they're obviously going to be in the mix. Miami, interesting move so far. But the Jets are like the most intriguing to me because they have Rodgers, right? They're still going to have a really good defense now. They have Rodgers coming in. Hopefully he's going to be 100%, and he's just going to – I think the Jets are going to shake it up. I think you can see all 3 of those teams, Miami, New York, and Buffalo, all in the playoffs next year, provided all the quarterbacks stay healthy. It's going to be interesting.
Let's move on to the AFC North. Baltimore Ravens. First thought is Patrick Queen, losing him and him going to the Steelers, because it's one thing if you lose Patrick Queen, you can't pay him. They're paying Roquan, they're paying these other guys on defense. But to lose him to the Pittsburgh Steelers, that move is that's intriguing me a lot. And we've seen a common occurrence we're going to talk about as we go through this. So many of these moves where these guys aren't getting repaid by their team and they're going to another team within the division. We're just seeing it across the league. It's crazy, and it's making for some spicy, juicy drama this next NFL season, because there's so many storylines that are going to surround it. So they lose him, but they bring in Derrick Henry. Not much else happened for Baltimore, but Baltimore is a great team, and we expect Baltimore to be, right back to where they were last year with a chance to go to the Super Bowl, in my opinion. I think that's where they're going to be, right there, provided Lamar stays healthy. Derrick Henry, bringing him in is great, but when it's crunch time, are you going to lean on that, or are you just going to run the ball 9 times in the AFC Championship game, and lose when you should have won? Is the way I'm with the Ravens. It's just at a point where it's like, yeah, everything looks great. It feels great during the season, but like, show me you can get it done. Show me you can get it. Same thing with the Bills. It's like you'll see these flashes, and it's like it looks great, but okay, show me when it counts in the playoffs against Kansas City. So I think the Ravens, they're going to be a great football team next year, and we're going to talk about them a lot next year and their chances, but it's going to come down to that moment. And I think getting Derrick Henry is a statement where, like, hey, once we get in that position again, we're going to pound the rock. And Derrick Henry, while he's at the later stages of his career, I feel like that was a great move, and a move that I think they should have made last year and traded for him and brought him in. And I feel like he would have been, a great asset for that team going down the stretch. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals. They swap out Joe Mixon. They send him to Houston, and then they signed Zach Moss. That's an interesting move that at least I thought it was interesting. T. Higgins did get tagged, but it's looking like he's going to get traded because they're saying they're not going to pay him long term. So that's going to be a move, coming up. See if he gets moved. Mike Gesicki they bring in. Tanner Hudson they re-signed. Drew Sample they re-signed. So they got 3 tight ends in that room. They're going to be tight end heavy offense. And then they signed Akeem Davis-Gaither, brought him back. They brought Von Bell back, who had been gone. So, I mean, the Bengals are another team. We expect them to be good. I do want to get your guys' opinion on that move where they send Joe Mixon out and they sign Zach Moss. Like I said, that was interesting. And then potentially, where's T. Higgins going to get moved? I don't know. But talking about the Bengals-Ravens, I kind of just wanted to sum those up together. Todd, what are your thoughts?
I mean, my big thing is I'm going to go back to the Ravens and signing Derrick Henry. And if we look back to that game against Kansas City, I think we might have mentioned it either when we were talking or whether I was on the show and we mentioned it. But I felt like both teams should have been running the ball more and earlier in that game. And I feel like, did that lead to the decision to go after Derrick Henry, and what version of Derrick Henry are we going to get? But I like it. I really do. I mean, I think it's in the way you put it, Pat, is a kind of a statement, but I'm interested to see how that pans out, because that really could help them at that part of the season when you're going to play some bad weather games and everything. And if you can freaking lean on Derrick, yeah.
For me, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with T. Higgins. One of the possible landing spots, because not only are you going to have to give up, like good capital to get him, but you're going to have the money to sign him. Like, you're going to have that, because this trade doesn't happen and he's not going somewhere, for 1 year. Wherever he goes, he's probably going to be there for a while. So I think of a team that has capital, has the cap moving forward, and needs a number 1 receiver. Carolina comes to mind for me. Other than that, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I don't think they keep him, especially not in the division, of course. But Carolina just came to mind for me as far as someone who needs a number 1.
Moving on to the Cleveland Browns. They bring Jameis in, sign him to a 1-year deal. We could be seeing him. We could be seeing Jameis Winston playing in Cleveland next year.
I'm in it for the sound bites, Pat.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. So entertaining. Jerry Jeudy, they get in a trade with Broncos. And Denver they're also shopping Cortland Sutton, just kind of a fire sale going on there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not super high on Jerry Jeudy, but at the same time, I mean, you gave up a 5th and 6th round pick. So what is it hurting you? You know what I mean? And he's not expected to be your number 1 guy. You got Amari Cooper, and then you got Njoku, who's a monster. So Jeudy just kind of being like a supporting role. I like that a lot for them. While I might not be so high on Jeudy, I think the fit is nice for him. Not too many big splashes going on in Cleveland right now. Unlike the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, boy, they're the team that go out and sign Russell Wilson to that contract where you're not paying him shit because Denver's handling all of it. So what a perk to have where your quarterback's only taking up, that percentage of the cap. Like I said earlier, Patrick Queen, they get him from the Ravens, just kind of like a, knife right to the heart of the Ravens there. A huge move for the Steelers. They get Dante Jackson in a trade with the Panthers where they send Deontay Johnson down to Carolina. I thought it was a great move. Deontay Johnson's days were numbered in Pittsburgh. You knew this was going to come, and you get a cornerback out of it. So I think that's a good move for Pittsburgh. They needed a corner. Jackson, I think, is a proven vet in this league. They signed Deshaun Elliott at safety, another move for their secondary. And they also send Kenny Pickett to the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Kenny Pickett era in Pittsburgh is over. Everybody on this podcast right now, let's give it up for ourselves because we were right on Kenny Pickett, and we are seeing it now play out exactly how we expected. We see these people defending him. just like they defended Daniel Jones, and now Daniel Jones is where he is. Kenny Pickett's out of Pittsburgh. So a lot to digest with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then anything you guys have on the Browns as well.
Well, we could spend a half hour on the Pittsburgh Steelers alone, honestly. You know, and kudos to the Steelers for not paying Pickett that contract, you know, like a Daniel Jones type of situation too. So they recognized it and cut their losses. Yeah, it sucks that you gave up, you know, a pick, but that's part of the game. And if you cut your losses, and you're still further ahead. I still believe that there's got to be a long-term plan. I think that, you know, you've got a couple of years of Russ. I don't know what their plan is. I don't know. I still wonder if there's a connection to Fields there or not. And the problem with Fields is his contract, you know, he's coming on to his 4th year. So you have to have contract talks with him basically before you made a deal, if that's the case. But there's going to be a long-term solution with the Steelers here at quarterback somehow. But hey, like you said, cheap investment with Russ. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers were one of those teams that we would always talk about who had the roster, they just needed the quarterback. Now, you know, Russ played actually pretty well last year when he was playing until they, you know, benched him towards the end. So it's going to be weird to see him in a Steelers uniform, but yeah, I don't know. I think that was huge for them. So yeah, they're going to be in it. They're going to be in it with the Ravens down the stretch, I think.
Yeah, just thinking about the Steelers, I know we're going to dive into the draft more, but off the top of my head, I feel like they got to attack cornerback early in that draft. Get a guy alongside Joey Porter Jr. for these next, you know, 5 to 10 years. I think that's main goal number one. And then after that, you know, get yourself a couple of these young receivers. And there's going to be a lot of receivers in this draft that can make an impact. So you're going to have, you know, plenty to pick from in this year's draft. And one thing about Pittsburgh Steelers is they know how to draft wide receivers. So let's move on to the AFC South. Houston Texans making a ton of noise. They hit on CJ Stroud, and they're saying, all right, we're going all in. We're putting all our chips in the middle of the table right now. You bring in Joe Mixon, and you gave up a 7th-round pick for him. So, I mean, in last year they had Dameon Pierce. They had Singletary. Singletary's gone. So you replace him with Joe Mixon. You re-sign Noah Brown, huge. You re-sign Dalton Schultz, huge. So CJ's got his weapons. Everything's in order. You got Nico. You got Tank Dell, who's going to be coming back. He's got everything he needs on his offense. They signed Danico Autry in free agency. And then the huge move for me was Daniel Hunter, bringing him in. Azeez El-Shahir, linebacker who played with the Titans last year. Before that, he was on the Niners. This is one of the guys that I think doesn't get enough hype in this league. There's some moves that they made in secondary. Jeff Okudah was the big one. Signs a 1-year prove-it deal. Okudah just feels like he hasn't – it just hasn't – I don't know. It hasn't come to fruition yet for Jeff Okudah in the NFL, but we'll see what he does there. Moving on to the Colts. They bring in Joe Flacco to be a backup, be a mentor for Anthony Richardson. If Richardson goes down, Flacco's a great guy to have, just like you had Minshew last year. They did sign Michael Pittman, what I think was the biggest move for them. They had to bring Michael Pittman back, and they got him back. And they also re-signed Kenny Moore. So good job by them keeping their guys in-house. Jacksonville Jaguars, like I mentioned earlier, they get Mac Jones. They get Gabe Davis. They also signed Devin Duvernay. Mitch Morse, I think, was huge for this team. They needed that anchor on the offensive line. And I think the Mitch Morse move to me is way greater impact than Gabe Davis, because I feel like they could have gone without getting Gabe Davis. That's something, you know, we could talk about another day. They did get the tag on Josh Allen, but no long-term deal. And then they signed Ronald Darby. They signed Eric Armstead and Darnell Savage on defense. Tennessee Titans, a lot going on there. They bring in Mason Rudolph as a backup, kind of a mentor to Will Levis. We'll see what they do in the draft. I think they're a team to look out for because it's a new head coach. They give Tony Pollard his bag. They give Calvin Ridley his bag. I thought this was very interesting offseason for the Tennessee Titans. They also signed Kenneth Murray. They signed Awuzie.
Oopsie.
And then they also signed Lloyd Cushenberry. But guys, am I crazy, or the Tennessee Titans? I feel like they're just making moves to they're just kind of like spending money to spend money right now. Their offensive line was pathetic last year, absolutely pathetic. And it's like, yeah, it's nice you bring in Tony Pollard, but is Tony Pollard going to be able to run behind that line when they were struggling to do it in Dallas last year? Because their offensive line was just horrid. Will Levis was getting abused. I think that's the main point for the Tennessee Titans going into this draft. But general thoughts on the AFC South?
What you're saying about the Titans, I agree with. There's some good offensive line depth in the draft, so I don't know if that's their plan, but, how many rounds are you going to pick an offensive lineman, depending on who's there and whatnot. But there is some depth there. So I don't know. Maybe that's where they're going. But the Texans, holy crap. I mean, does it just feel like a team that's just ascending at like a record pace or what? I mean, Daniel Hunter was the guy I wanted to see. Who's going to get him? Like, who's going to step up? What situations he going to go into? And he's going into a great situation.
Yeah.
The other thing about the Texans I want to say, you guys probably don't know this because I got this from the Bears beat reporter. The Bears signed Keenan Allen, obviously, but the team that was going hot after him was the Texans. But in the end, the Bears actually gave a little bit better offer. So they're hungry. I mean, if they're going after Keenan after making all these other splashes, so they're going to be interesting.
T. Higgins, maybe that's a destination for him.
Yeah.
That would be a home run for them if they could pull that off. Yeah, I mean, for the Titans, to touch on their getting Pollard, I think they don't bring him in to necessarily replace Henry. I think it's more like a 1A 1B. They like Spears, so they can kind of get Pollard back in another role. But we talked about this too, and then they go and blow the bag on Calvin Ridley, giving him what, $22 million a year, somewhere right around there, 23.
They have $50 million guaranteed.
It's crazy. And they needed so much help on the defensive end, and then everything they do early is offense. So it's just interesting to kind of see the route that they took. And then for Jacksonville, I've never been high on Gabe Davis. I don't think that he really does much or offers much other than being a deep threat. And you come in, you sign him like $13 million a year with incentive to earn more. And I feel like if they didn't, they could have offered Ridley more than, or just basically what Tennessee gave them. They could have matched that if they didn't sign Gabe Davis. So I don't know. I feel like it was just like, once they signed Gabe Davis, I was like, there's no shot they get Ridley. And I don't know, kind of just a head scratcher to me. Bulk.
Well, what's interesting is even after, and you and me agree on Gabe Davis. How many games, these last couple of years did Gabe Davis just had like no targets or, one catch for like 9 yards? He's so inconsistent. So to be paying a guy that is, capable of having those, you're paying him 3 years, $39 million with a max value of $50 million. And this was early too, where the Jags brought him in. I'm just thinking, like, you have so many holes on your roster right now. And it's like, they feel like if they just surround Trevor Lawrence with like the most talent, that's what they've been doing. And it hasn't worked because your team's soft and your defense stinks and your secondary is horrible. And bringing Gabe Davis in doesn't solve any of that. So I thought, like you said, Tyler, I thought that was really interesting move by them. And then even after signing Gabe Davis, they were the favorites to land Ridley because Ridley wanted to stay in Jacksonville. He literally wanted to stay in Jacksonville. New England offered him more money, and he told his agent, I'm still leaning Jacksonville. And then Tennessee just comes out of nowhere and gives him that contract. Just kind of like they came out of nowhere last year when it was D-Hop was about to go to New England, and then Tennessee comes in at the last second. I just feel like Tennessee and Jacksonville not spending their money in the best places, but I can't forget about, Mitch Morse, getting him, and then also getting Eric Armstead. Those are moves where Jacksonville addressed weaknesses.
Yeah.
Moving on to the AFC West, Denver Broncos are going to look awfully different. We don't know who the hell their quarterback's going to be. You know, probably going to be a rookie quarterback, but who knows what's going to happen. Not much going on there, boys. They sign Brandon Jones, they re-sign Will Lutz, and they re-sign Lil Jordan Humphrey, and that's it. Everybody else is gone. Justin Simmons still hasn't been signed. And then they trade Judy. It's going to be a rebuild for the Denver Broncos, and they're paying, I believe the number is $85 million to Russ Wilson these next 2 years for him not to play for them. So
Yikes.
any team that does that is in a massive, massive hole. So
Huge.
not only that, but you're in a division with Patrick Mahomes, and now you're in a division with Jim Harbaugh. So not too optimistic about the Broncos and what they've had to do. Kansas City Chiefs. They tagged Snead. As of right now, he's still a Kansas City Chief, and they re-signed Chris Jones to a massive 5-year, $158 million contract, $100 million guaranteed. And they still somehow have the money to bring in Hollywood Brown yesterday. What a move for the Chiefs. They get him 1-year deal, $11 million. Hollywood Brown, I said it yesterday. I feel like, you know, fantasy football, that's a guy who's going to be a top 10 receiver, because put him in with Andy Reid's offense, with Patrick Mahomes, and kind of like the deep plays, the deep splash plays of Mahomes, just making it happen. That's going to be Hollywood Brown on the receiving end. I feel like Rashee Rice is going to be more of like that possession guy. And I feel like Hollywood is just going to get loose on some defenses, and it's going to be exciting. So I feel like that was a massive move for the Kansas City Chiefs. Their wide receiver room gets much better, and we know they're going to do something in the draft to get another playmaker in that offense. The Raiders. They signed Gardner Minshew. God damn, is that going to be a sexy outfit for Gardner Minshew in that Raiders black and silver. Love that for him. And then, like I said, they bring in Christian Wilkins to a massive 4-year, $110 million contract. Antonio Pierce said it. You got to cut the head off the snake, Patrick Mahomes. How do you do that? You get tougher, you get more physical, and you build it from the inside out. And they're doing that with Christian Wilkins. You put him next to Max Crosby, and goddamn, the Raiders, they might not be winning the division next year. I'm not saying that, but I feel like that defense is going to be much, much better. I feel like right now what's left is you rebuild that secondary, the rest of this offseason. It is going to be interesting what they're going to do at quarterback. Do you start Gardner Minshew? Do you start Aiden O'Connell? Or are they drafting somebody? That's a point of discussion, what the Raiders are going to do at quarterback. But I love the move getting Christian Wilkins, and like that's just another statement Antonio Pierce is making of what kind of football team he wants to have. Los Angeles Chargers, interesting team. They had to make some cuts. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams are gone. They did get to restructure Bosa, Khalil Mack. Those guys coming back is huge for them. They're going to look different offensively for sure, though. They did get Hayden Hurst. They also got Will Dissly, so they're going tight ends. Wide receiver, big question mark for this team. Quentin Johnson had a horrible rookie year. What do they do at 5? Do they trade down, or is that potentially where Dunze goes? I'm interested to see what this team does. They also bring in Gus Edwards. AFC West, Todd.
Sticking with the Chargers, they're another team that I'm looking at that's up there, and I almost feel like they're again another team that's forced to trade back just to gain pieces on the offensive side, because I mean, what can they do? I mean, they're in cap hell. They restructured their ends contracts, which was absolutely huge to save them somewhat. But I feel like if they were able to trade back to a quarterback needy team, then they could pick up some more weapons. Hollywood Brown was the other guy. I said Danielle Hunter was the guy I was watching in free agency. And it was like, where's he going to go? Well, Hollywood Brown was the other guy. It's like, where's he going to go and what type of situations is he going to be in? Well, he landed in a good one. So that'll be a real interesting matchup. So I'm excited to see that one.
Yeah, for the Chiefs, I still think, depending on what they do, they might go wide receiver in the draft. I think they need one more, though. They need one more. I like Hollywood, but I'd still like to see Michael Gallup, who the Cowboys just cut. I already talked to Pat about the Chiefs, for me, being a landing spot for him. Just having someone who can be a red zone threat, who can be that high point guy. And then the Raiders now, to me, being one of those teams that is now building and has a solid roster. They just need a quarterback. I'm not huge on Gardner like some of my boys are. Love him, but he's not going to get you. He's not a playoff quarterback, right? Like, he's not going to carry a team, in my opinion. But either way, yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be another year for the Chiefs to just take the division and run with it. The Broncos are going to be irrelevant forever.
I feel like that was a statement made by Harbaugh too. They not only did they cut the 2 receivers, they also cut Austin Eckler, who goes to Washington, and then they bring in Gus Edwards. So Gus Edwards goes from one Harbaugh to the other. And I just thought, and then not to mention they signed the tight ends, and Harbaugh is just saying, hey, we're going to play tough nose. We're going to play physical, punch you in the mouth football. Let's move on to the NFC. We'll start off with Tyler's Dallas Cowboys in the NFC East. Not too much to talk about with this team. They did sign Eric Kendricks. They bring Jordan Lewis back, but that's it. They lose Tony Pollard. Running back's going to be a question.
All in.
But this is, we talked about with the Bills earlier. This is what happens when your quarterback is taking up this much of your cap. And, when your quarterback takes up this percentage of your cap and then fails to get it done when, it means the most in the postseason, it's really limiting your team, because your team, you can't go and attack any kind of weakness that you have in the offseason, because now CeeDee Lamb's contract's coming up. Micah Parsons' contract coming up. What do they do with Brandon Cooks? What are they going to do at running back? It's a bunch of question marks. DeMarcus Lawrence as well. So Dallas Cowboys, I'm going to leave that to you here, Tyler. Moving on to the New York Giants, they bring in Drew Lock. Is he the day 1 starter for the Giants? Who knows? Are they going to make a move in the draft? That's going to be an interesting team. Maybe they trade up. They also bring in Devin Singletary. They lose Saquon. They bring Isaiah McKenzie in. They sign John Runyon, and they absolutely rip off the Carolina Panthers in a trade for Brian Burns, where they don't even have to give up a 1 for him. So you put Brian Burns on the opposite side of Thibodeau going forward, and I feel like you got something there on the edge for the New York Giants. They also signed Jalen Mills. They did lose McKinney in free agency, though. So I feel like secondary, another team where secondary is big for them going into the draft. But having those 2 edges, like I said, you got Burns and Thibodeau. That's really good for the Giants. Wide receiver, I think, also a big need for this team. And Darren Waller literally retired today. So this is a new topic. But one thing I do want to say before I bring up the Philadelphia Eagles. So Saquon goes to the Eagles, and I'm seeing on social media. Perfect. Tower makes my point for me. I don't even have to explain more. I'm seeing all week these Giants fans attacking Saquon Barkley, and that's the stigma, is that he's a traitor.
Mm-hmm.
Let me remind you Giants fans and anybody else who has this take like Tyler, this team had the ability. It was Daniel Jones, it was Saquon Barkley. It was this time last year, and they had to give a contract to one of these 2 guys. You know what you did, Giants? You paid Daniel Jones, who is now not going to be your quarterback, with everything that you had to your knowledge up to that point. Saquon Barkley's tape, Daniel Jones' tape. Those 2 guys, you paid Daniel Jones over Saquon Barkley. And I ranted about this on an episode back in October about Daniel Jones not deserving that contract and why Barkley did deserve it, because he was clearly the better player. Saquon Barkley has stuck by this team year after year after year after year after year of garbage football team where you don't get him an offensive line, you don't know how to draft anything on the offensive line to help this kid. Your quarterbacks have sucked, absolutely sucked, to the point where the defense knows the ball is going to Saquon Barkley, and he still produced for you. And you know what? The whole time there's all these trade talks. Is Barkley going to get traded? He stuck by you. He said, I'm a New York Giant. I'm going to stay with the New York Giants. So the fact that now he's a traitor because he's got the opportunity to go somewhere that is going to pay him what he deserves. And is he slighted? Hell yeah, I hope he's slighted. He should be slighted that you chose to pay Daniel Jones over him. So if he's going to make a statement by saying, fuck you, I'm going to play with Philly, round of applause for Saquon Barkley, because some of these moves is like, it's kind of scummy, like what the guy did. I'm on Saquon Barkley. I'm team Saquon on this. And I'm glad he did this. I really am. Talking about the Eagles, they bring in him. They bring in Kenny Pickett, trade for backup quarterback. They also signed Devontae Parker. They re-signed Landon Dickerson, which was huge, but they lose Jason KELCE to retirement for now. Jason KELCE's retired. Huge loss for them. And then also Fletcher Cox is gone. So 2 cornerstone pieces on the Eagles that are no longer going to be there. But 2 huge moves. Howie Roseman, I mean, they're going to talk about Saquon, but actually 3 huge moves. I'm forgetting. They bring in Bryce Huff, 3 years, $51 million from the Jets. Great player. So this is what they do. They attack the D-line. They lose Fletcher Cox, but they're bringing in Bryce Huff. They signed Devin White. Devin White is not at a level I think he was, back when the Bucs won the Super Bowl, but he is a massive, massive upgrade over everything else that the Eagles were putting out at linebacker last year. And then the biggest move for that defense, you bring in C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who we talked about all last year. This team was clearly missing. They were missing that leader on that defense. They were missing that guy in that secondary who was going to, be a real presence. And you get him back. They signed him 3-year deal worth $33 million. I think that was a massive move for the Philadelphia Eagles. But thoughts on the Giants, Eagles, and Saquon Barkley?
I mean, even Tiki Barber was in on the Saquon Barkley slander, and I don't get it, but whatever. I mean, the division just seems like, sorry, Tyler, and any Giants fans, but it seems like a one-team division because Howie Roseman's doing Howie Roseman things. And I don't want to rehash everything that Pat just said, but it's just like when I said with Brandon Beane, it's like you got these guys at different levels and they know how to manage a team. It seems like the Cowboys literally don't, like they're trying to figure out, like, we don't know what to do. Oh, well, we got a quarterback contract. We don't know how to handle this. Like it just feels like they don't know how to handle the situation. Mm-hmm. Then you got the Giants who, I don't know, the last couple of years, they just shot themselves in the foot, especially like you said, with, stupid quarterback contracts. And we haven't talked about it yet. You got the Commanders who just went out and I don't know, they were picking up free agents based on whoever the eldest player out there was or something. I mean, I think the average age of their free agent signings has got to be 32 or something. So it's, hey, Philly's impressive.
Yeah, I just wanted to see Barkley go anywhere but the NFC East. Just get him out of the division. He's one of those guys, though, who obviously is one of the best backs in the league and deserves to be paid like it. But the amount, the uncertainty of his health is like that had to have been the reason why the Giants just didn't want to give him the bag. It's just the health implications, but it sucks that the Eagles got him because now they're loaded. They're absolutely loaded. And to your guys' points, Howie Roseman is one of the best in the business, unfortunately, and he just continues to do it year after year. In addition, they've been drafting really well. The Commanders get Dan Quinn and then bring half of Dallas's team with them, including the staff.
Yeah.
Like Dorrance Armstrong getting $15 million a year. That was actually interesting. He's good, but I did not think that he would be getting that. Biadasz, which will, gearing towards the Cowboys, like they lost Tyron Smith, Biadasz, all these other guys. They just have so many holes to fill, and they haven't done shit. You bring Kendricks, in on a 1-year deal. He had to spurn the 49ers in order to do that. And then you re-sign CJ Goodwin, special teams guy, long snapper, Jordan Lewis on a 1-year deal. What are we doing? We're all in. We're all in, but what are we doing? They're, you know, you already mentioned about another team, but the Cowboys are in cap management hell right now. They draft well. That's the one thing that I think they consistently do year after year. They draft well, and maybe that's what they're relying on this year to kind of just keep them off of any big contracts. But they have they've got some work to do for sure. I think Cooks is there for the year. I don't think they get rid of him, especially after cutting Gallup. Their focus has to be O-line, and then on the defensive side of the ball, you know, they're still solid across the board, but you know, they still have some holes. I think depth is a big concern. So shout out to the Eagles for having somehow the cap room to sign all these guys. I don't know how they do it, but they're so far they have like an A+ from me.
I forgot to mention the Commanders. They bring in Marcus Mariota, who probably see as maybe a bridge quarterback to whoever they draft, which is looking like Jaden Daniels at this point. Or just a mentor for him. And they bring in Austin Eckler, 2 years worth up to $11.4 million. Eckler's been pretty banged up. We'll see how much they get out of him as far as production. And the same thing can be said for Zach Ertz, who they bring in at tight end. Dorrance Armstrong was interesting. Cleveland Farrell was interesting. Dante Fowler Jr. was interesting. Like Todd said, the age of some of these guys that they're kind of using their money on was interesting to me. Bobby Wagner, bringing him in at linebacker. I did like the move of getting Jeremy Chin on a 1-year, $4 million deal. I like Jeremy Chin. I just feel like he's been dealing with injuries, and he's also been on an awful defense. I feel like that's a good player for Dan Quinn to have, but that's all I have on the NFC East. Moving on to the NFC North and Todd's Chicago Bears. They get DeAndre Swift. They get Keenan Allen. They signed Coleman Shelton at center. They signed Gerald Everett. So they're making, you know, some very good upgrades on that offense. And we talked about center being a need for them. So I feel like Coleman Shelton, while they might need something in the draft still, that's a good, that, like you said, Todd, you said it to me, that's a huge upgrade over what you had getting him, and a player that knows Waldron's system. Obviously, the Keenan Allen, I was saying this to Todd, ultimate pro. Like, there's nobody better that you'd want in your room to teach these young guys, whoever else that they bring in through the draft. And then DJ Moore as well. That's a great two-headed monster at receiver, and Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. Swift, I really like, because I feel like if you get him and you get Roschon Johnson both going, that's like that thunder and lightning combination between those two backs. And then also a huge move for them was re-signing Jalen Johnson, giving him the bag, 4 years, $76 million. So you're locking down that number one corner, top 5 corner in the NFL, and he solidified a Chicago Bears. So I feel like that was just even bigger move. That was probably the biggest move that the Bears have made. Kevin Byard, bringing him in 2 years, $15 million. Not in his prime anymore, but another great guy to have on that roster, great guy to have in the locker room, and he could still make some plays. Jonathan Owens, they also agree to terms with him. So kind of a switch out at safety. They lose Eddie Jackson, and they bring in those two guys. Todd, latest thoughts on your Chicago Bears and what they've done?
Probably my favorite pickup until the Keenan Allen pickup, but was actually Gerald Everett. And again, a guy who's worked with Shane Waldron, and I just think him as a compliment to Komet, I just think it's going to be fantastic. And I think, you know, red zone, yak, everything. I love that move. And, you know, the first 2 years that Poles was there, you saw the tear down and then the start to build up. And now it's like, you know, some of these, they're actually building depth. And I think I said it on the show one time, and the difference to me between a good team and a bad team is, do you have depth? when one guy goes down, are you going to have, the bodies to fill it without, taking a big step back? And when you get a team who can fill depth and with some quality players, then I think that you got something going. But yeah, I like it. They're definitely building for something. Nobody knows who's going to throw the ball apparently to any of these guys, but I don't know. The arrow's pointing up, I'd say.
Going through the rest of the division, Detroit Lions, they signed Graham Glasnow at guard, but they lose Jonah Jackson to my Los Angeles Rams. They also signed DJ Reader. They trade for Carlton Davis. Big need for that team was corner. So I thought that move was for Carlton Davis was big. They also re-signed Emmanuel Mosley. Green Bay, very interesting so far. They move off Aaron Jones after he refuses to take a pay cut, and then they sign Josh Jacobs. So they're switching out Aaron Jones for Josh Jacobs, and they also signed Xavier McKinney, 4-year, $68 million. Big move for that defense. Other than that, not too much going on in Green Bay. Minnesota, team that perhaps may be trading up in the draft to take a quarterback, because right now it's Sam Darnold who would be, the quarterback opening day for them. They bring him in on a 1-year deal. Aaron Jones, I just mentioned, goes from Green Bay to Minnesota. And they also re-sign Brandon Powell. They bring in Trent Sherfield for receiver. They bring in Jonathan Grenard. Yes, they lose Daniel Hunter, but they bring in Jonathan Grenard, and they sign him to 4 years, $76 million. And they also get Van Ginkel from Miami, who was a player that played great for the Miami Dolphins when, he was asked to step up last year. I like Van Ginkel a lot. I think Minnesota, while you lose Daniel Hunter, those are two good players that you have on your edge now with Grenard and Van Ginkel. And they also signed Jerry Tillery at D tackle. Other than that, though, the topic really is the Bears. Is it Caleb in the draft? And then Minnesota, are they going to trade up to take one of these top guys, J.J. McCarthy or Michael Penix or Bo Nix, one of those tier 2 guys, go to Minnesota? Because I don't know. Sam Darnold, Kevin O'Connell is a phenomenal offensive mind. And then you have Justin Jefferson as well, and you got Aaron Jones as well, Addison. You got the weapons. But to me, I feel like it's got to be quarterback. It's got to be quarterback for the Vikings in this first round. And if you're going to trade up, if you're going to make a move, do it. Get it done and get your guy, because that defense did improve last year. And I think with what Kevin O'Connell got last year out of Josh Dobbs, for that period, and then even Mullins down the stretch, like the guy can coach. This guy can coach offense. Yeah. So interested to see what they do in the draft. But thoughts on the rest of the NFC North?
Well, I agree. I think the two storylines are the Bears, and the Vikings. And again, touching back on the Vikings is, don't forget that they've already, and it's crazy, it's so early, that they've already traded for the Texans' first-round pick. So they're gearing up. They are going to at least try to make a move, or there's a handshake deal in place, because why do you already this early trade for that round 1 pick from the Texans if you don't have something verbally in place that if this happens, we're going to make a move? I mean, it just seems bizarre to go and make that move at this point without having something.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, the Lions made some moves, like you mentioned. So I don't know if you feel like they're still the front runner in that division, but Green Bay, I think it's going to be seeing that growth from Jordan Love, that second half of the season he had, and then into the playoffs. Like, I think he really showed that he is the guy for them, and he can be their guy moving forward. So swapping out Jones for Jacobs is kind of like I think Jones had good production for him, just couldn't stay healthy too much. Jacobs typically has been healthy. I know last year he had his ups and downs with it, but I don't know. I think Green Bay is the team for me to watch, other than obviously Chicago, because the Bears are I don't know, Todd. What are they going to do? Are they taking Caleb 1, or are they sticking with Justin, man?
It's I don't know. I don't know.
That's-
You know, it's there's rumors that Justin hasn't been made available. There's rumors that the asking price is too steep. And is that again? And I heard this theory, and it's kind of got you thinking: is that another handshake deal that if this happens? Because remember, they haven't even met with Caleb, if Caleb's the guy, for more than the 10 or 20-minute period that they're allowed at the draft. He hasn't had his top 30 visit. You know, he hasn't even released his medicals. So how could, if you're Ryan Poles, how do you say, yeah, he's definitely the guy without having all the information? So is there a, you know, verbal deal in place or something, and that's why Justin wasn't made available? I don't know. But, you know, I think the Lions are the team to beat in the division. Until they aren't, somebody's going to have to step up and show they are.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Caleb Williams thing is just so crazy. He's just not doing anything normal. Everything he's doing is the complete opposite of what you're supposed to do.
We can go off on a tangent here, but I talked to Pat about this, and I really feel like this is a product of the NIL, and I think you're going to see more and more and more of it. You know, I mean, guys are making millions in college, and it's like, I'm going to do what I want. You want me or you don't. You know, it's complex. I don't want to get into that, but I think we're going to see more of it.
Let's move on, though, to the NFC South. The Atlanta Falcons have their quarterback. Todd, you called it. Kirk Cousins to the Atlanta Falcons. What a great fit. You saw it coming. 4 years, 180 mil. The Atlanta Falcons, we talked about, they were that team. They had the roster. They were just missing the quarterback. Ritter was so bad last year and lost games for that team. And now you have that guy in Kirk Cousins who could step in. And to me, they're my favorite. They're the favorite to win that division with that signing. They also bring in Darnell Mooney, 3 years, 39 mil. I'm not huge on Mooney, but, you know, supporting role. I could see him being, you know, the number 3 in there, seeing what else they do. They also get Rondale Moore in the trade with the Cardinals, and all they had to give up was Desmond Ritter. So you're just giving up Desmond Ritter, and then you're getting Rondale Moore for that. I love that move for the Falcons. I feel like they still need to get another receiver, though, here in the draft. Shore up that defense, because the defense was good, but they weren't very consistent last year. And I feel like they could do something here coming up to just shore up that defense. But again, I love the move for Kirk Cousins. They're the favorite to me to win this division. The Carolina Panthers are my favorite to not win a game next season, because our buddy Weed was telling us, he's like, oh my God, the Panthers are just getting all of the Jaguars sloppy seconds. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, to be real, like, they're a roster of sloppy seconds from around the league. Just all of these players that are thrown away, not given a second contract by these teams, are Carolina Panthers, it feels like. And they don't know how to draft. And the players that they do draft over the years, they trade them and don't get, you know, what they should for those players. So it's just a mess in Carolina right now. They brought in Robert Hunt. They brought in Damian Lewis. 2 moves that were absolutely necessary. If you're going to have any chance to, you know, to get this thing going at all, you got to protect Bryce Young, who you invested all of this into. They also get Deontay Johnson from the Steelers, as we talked about earlier. But is Deontay Johnson, you know, the best guy for your locker room in a losing environment? We've seen some things over, you know, the course of his career that provide that it's not a great fit on a team that's going to be struggling culturally. We'll see what Canales, their new head coach, you know, gets going there. But like I said, it's not looking great. They get Ashawn Robinson, guy at the end of his career. They get Chase on from the Jags, who hasn't done much his career. Josie Jewell, I'm just seeing that now. I liked that guy a lot in Denver last year. So that's a Dan Morgan signing right there, the new GM. They bring back Troy Hill at corner, and they signed Dane Jackson. They signed Jordan Fuller. Like I said, sloppy seconds from across the league. We don't expect this team to make too much noise, and they don't even have their pick in the first round. So that's all I got on the Carolina Panthers. Moving on to the New Orleans Saints, a team that has been in cap hell these last couple of years, where they've just kind of pushed back their salary cap problems year after year after year. and now they're paying for it. They bring in Cedric Wilson at receiver. They re-signed Demario Davis. They signed Willie Gay from the Chiefs, and then they bring back Tyrann Mathieu. But that's all that's going on with the Saints. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they re-signed Baker Mayfield. Biggest news out of Tampa was bringing him back with Mike Evans. So you got that tandem back in Tampa, and some people have this team favored. I like Atlanta better personally. They bring Levante David back on defense. They re-signed Jordan Whitehead, who was with the Jets, back in Tampa. Other than that, I don't have much on Tampa. To me, I think Kirk Cousins is the headline of this division right now, him going to Atlanta. And then the second headline would be Baker and Mike Evans back in Tampa. But out of those two teams, who would be your guys' favorite?
Oh, I think Atlanta. I said that back in February. I said, if we were talking about teams that needed a quarterback, and I think the quote was, if you're a team that's a quarterback away, why would you go rookie if you can go all in on Kirk Cousins? And Atlanta was the team. So my favorite's Atlanta for sure. And on the flip side, just to touch on the Panthers, every time they hit big on a player when they draft and they trade them. It's like when you hit on a player, you have to retain them. And it's like, I'd love to trace where the draft capital went that they got for these players that they traded, because I don't think it was allocated properly. I don't think they've made very good picks with what they got from these players. But yeah, I'd say the Falcons are the team to beat.
Yeah, I agree. I think also, just to touch on that, I would love to go back and see what the Panthers got in that McCaffrey trade, just based on his value and what he brings to the table. Like, I'd love to see what they got back from that. But yeah, it's the Falcons. It's the Falcons. I also like them. I mentioned to Pat to bring up Gallup again. He's from Atlanta, so Atlanta needing another receiver. If they can get him cheap, that would be great for them. Unless, and then if not, you'll probably see him go wide receiver in the draft. But Tampa, yeah, Baker played great last year. It was the first time, I think he might have had one good year in Cleveland, but that was the best year he's had in his career. They gave him, a solid contract. He deserved it, but it's just, can he do it again? Can Baker do it again? I don't know.
New OC in Tampa too.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, it's the Falcons though. They have the roster, and then to your guys' point, just bringing in Kirk just solidified it. So,
moving on to the NFC West, capping this off, talk about the Arizona Cardinals. Just mentioned it. They get Desmond Ridder in a trade with Atlanta. They give up Rondale Moore. They also signed Jonah Williams to a 2-year, $30 million contract. Good for that own line. They signed Bilal Nichols at D tackle. Mac Wilson, 3 years, $12 million at linebacker. Sean Murphy Bunting signs a 3-year, $25 million deal for them at corner. Not too much going on in Arizona. Bringing up the San Francisco 49ers. They signed Leonard Floyd to 2 years, $20 million. It's going to be really ugly to see him in a 49ers uniform. That's going to break my heart. But Brandon Staley, new defensive coordinator. Leonard Floyd, guy that played with him in Chicago, played with him with the Rams. Was not surprising for me to see Leonard Floyd get picked up there. Chase Young, not retained. And they also signed Devondre Campbell. I'm just seeing that now. That's a good move for them. Seattle Seahawks. Is this a team that's going to make a move for a quarterback in the draft? I feel like trading for Sam Howell tells you that they're not going to. Maybe give Sam Howell an opportunity, whether it's after Geno or let him compete for the starting job. I just feel like that was a move that told me maybe Seattle doesn't like these tier 2, tier 3 quarterbacks as much as some of these other teams. They re-signed Noah Fant. They re-signed George Fant. They re-signed Leonard Williams. And they let Jamal Adams go. Boy, did they lose that trade for Jamal Adams. Do we remember what they gave up for that? And the production that they've gotten from Jamal Adams over these years is just awful. He's never on the field. I've always said it. He's just a glorified cheerleader on the sideline because he's never out there. And when he is out there, he's getting burned. Moving on to my Los Angeles Rams. So shockingly, yesterday, Aaron Donald retires. A couple people asked me if they thought I was surprised by the move. I was pretty surprised, to be honest with you, because there was a lot more talks about him retiring last offseason, the offseason before. Didn't really hear too much about it this offseason, that there was any hint of him retiring. But the fact that he's just going out like this, like, yeah, I'm retiring, and he's just dropping it out in the world. Like, some of these guys, they just need, like, LeBron James. Part of the reason why I can't stand LeBron James is because how he has to make everything about him. Aaron Donald is the greatest Los Angeles Ram of all time. Saying this to my dad yesterday. He is the greatest Ram of all time. He is the greatest defensive player I've seen in my lifetime. I was born 1993. The greatest defensive player I've seen in my lifetime. Just absolutely dominant. The kind of impact that this guy made. And he's just like, yeah, I'm retiring. He's just dropping it on the world. He doesn't need no farewell tour, like these other guys. He doesn't need to, just take it all in and get all this like recognition and shit. He's just out. He's done. He's content. He said the one thing that he needed was a world championship, and he got that world championship. And he was a massive reason why I watched America's game, Los Angeles Rams, that 2021 year last week. Ironically, I watched it last week, and he was headliner, one of the guys that was talking. And just to see what that meant to him that season and how hard that he worked, and what he came from. His dad told him when he was a kid, like, big players make big-time plays, big-time games. And that was him. Every big-time game, every time we needed a big moment, big play, that was Aaron Donald. He made the play on Jimmy G to end the game in the NFC Championship, makes the play on Joe Burrow, 4th down in the Super Bowl, and he says, ring me. And Aaron Donald, absolute legend, going to miss the hell out of watching that guy play football. We signed Jimmy Garoppolo. Very interesting move, I thought. Demarcus Robinson, bringing him back, I feel was big. They signed Kobe Parkinson to a 3-year, $22 million deal at tight end. And we made a statement because we re-signed Kevin Dotson at guard. We bring in Jonah Jackson from the Lions, all-pro guy at guard. And we drafted Steve Avila last year, who was a massive hit. We had a phenomenal draft last year. And now Avila can go back to playing center is what he came up playing in football. And we have those two guards. We have Havenstein coming back. And we also restructured Noteboom. So the offensive line is set. Everything is set right now for Matthew Stafford, Kyron Williams, and all those weapons. I would like to see them draft a tight end. I do like Davis Allen, who we drafted out of Clemson last year. But Higbee's at the end of his career, coming off a very serious injury. I'd like to see us draft a tight end. We bring Darius Williams back, who had been in Jacksonville, but he won Super Bowl playing corner with us a couple of years ago. Loved that move. Guy who's, you look at his grade from last year, he was a top 5 corner. I was shocked Jacksonville cut him because they were really bad secondary. And the fact that they let him go, the only player that was really doing anything for him, and that we get him back to 3 years, $22 million deal as our number 1 corner, is a guy who can, just like show how to be a pro to all these young corners that we have in our team. Love that move, bringing him back. And then I also love bringing Cameron Curl in. Really like him as a player, and he is a huge upgrade over Jordan Fuller at safety. So excited about what my Los Angeles Rams are doing, but very sad about Aaron Donald retiring. Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I got a few things on this division. I mean, your Rams, it's funny. It's like they took the approach where, they went all in. I mean, they went all in to win that Super Bowl, right? And it's like, what happens when teams do that? They just fall off after that. And they didn't. They've kind of done a soft rebuild, and they're ascending again, which is really, really, really amazing and something you don't see in today's NFL. So hats off to the Rams, honestly. The Seahawks, I think Sam Howell is their plan personally, but the Cardinals, to me are pretty interesting. You know, they lost Hollywood Brown, and it's always been assumed that Marvin Harrison Jr. was going to fall to them in the trade. You know, just about every mock is showing it, and just it's what everybody thinks. But it'll be interesting because now they're going to need, you know, some wide receiver help. And luckily, I think there's 3 guys up at the top that are going to be hits. But one guy you didn't mention that they picked up was Justin Jones, who was the D tackle for the Bears, and he was actually an ascending player, and he signed a 3-year, $30 million contract. So that'll help them inside, and we'll see what a healthy Kyler Murray does too. So they've just been a team that you watched all last year, and you're like, this team's better than their record, and it's just hopefully that they can rebound and provide some type of competition in the division next year.
I love what the Rams have done. I think the Niners didn't get better. The Rams got better. The Rams were not too far behind San Francisco last year, and I think now they actually are going to give them a run for their money as far as who can win the division. If Stafford stays healthy, you know how I feel about Stafford. I think he's a dog, so I love him. If he can stay healthy, and then all those young guys that they have progressing into year 2 and just getting better and already having a year in the NFL down, because you know how it is for rookies. It's a big adjustment for them. So going into year 2, you see a lot of growth usually going into their sophomore year. So I actually love the Rams, and I would like to see what the odds are for division winner, because that's something I could put some money on right there.
Todd, I'm glad you brought it up. Not only did Arizona lose Hollywood Brown, but they trade Rondale Moore as well. So you think that move, it has to be Marvin Harrison there at 4 in the draft for them. It'd be shocking if they don't take him. And then the Niners, there are some rumblings. There's some smoke out there about Brandon Ayuk possibly getting traded, and Brandon Ayuk not getting brought back. And there's also some smoke about Deebo Samuel getting traded. So there could be some moves coming up for the 49ers that we're not going to be able to talk about today that could happen before this draft. But that's it for the NFC West. That is it for our NFL free agency recap. Todd, it's been an absolute blast. Thank you for taking the time and talking some NFL with us today.
Yeah, it's fun.
All right, we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, thanks.
Once again, I want to thank Todd for coming on, talking some NFL free agency with us. We'll be sure to check back in with him very soon, as we got the NFL draft coming up, and his Chicago Bears are the main headline of that. Coming up next, we're going to dive into a little NHL trade deadline recap and talk with our good friend Adam Rude about what's going on in hockey, the latest in the NHL. Coming up next. Joining us now to talk some NHL trade deadline and the latest in the NHL, Adam Rude. How we doing?
Pretty good.
Rudy.
Ready to be back. Talk about Vegas's miracle they pulled off.
Let's do it. It's good to see you again. Appreciate you coming on. So trade deadline happened last week. Last time we spoke with you, it was coming up, and there were some moves that we thought about might get done. But what are your takeaways from the trade deadline as a whole? Biggest moves that got made?
Things need to change in the NHL. It's got to be addressed. Vegas has done it for the second year in a row. Same player. They pop him on LTIR. They make some big moves at the deadline, circumvent the cap. Willing to bet he's going to be playing game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals. So they pretty much pulled all the big pieces with the exception of Gensel going to Carolina. So I have a feeling that's going to get addressed in the offseason. But there were some big moves and some small moves. So
what was the move that got made that's really you think is going to put a team over the top? Like they were here, but now they're here after what they acquired.
Vegas. I mean, they went out. They got outside of Tanev, who got moved a little bit before the deadline. They went out, they got Hannafin, who was the other biggest piece coming out of Calgary. So they shored up their defensive pairings. And then out of nowhere, they pulled Thomas Hertl out. So they have probably the most stacked center group. Their offense is loaded. I think they have Chandler Stevenson playing their 4th line center. and he's like one of the top players in the NHL as far as depth pieces go. So it's ridiculous. They put Stone on LTIR, so the cap came off the books, and then he can play as soon as the playoffs start. So it's a little bit ridiculous, but I think Vegas has kind of cemented themselves as the favorite this year.
See, you mentioned Gensel earlier. Carolina, last 10 games, they're 6-3-1. And they did win Jake Gensel's debut. How do you feel about that move for them? Does that really make them a true contender in the Eastern Conference?
Well, I mean, I think they already were contenders, to be honest. This is just kind of, you're there, you know what you're missing, so you went out and you got it. This is kind of like an all or nothing move, usually, but they really didn't give up a whole lot in exchange to get him, so it really wasn't all or nothing. They managed to fleece Pittsburgh somehow. Pittsburgh got on paper the first round pick, but there's so many, stipulations tied to that with the conditions that I don't think it'll actually be a first round pick unless Carolina makes the finals.
So we talk about Vegas, we talk about Gensel to Carolina. Any goalie moves that happen?
I mean, the Devils went out. They got 2 new goalies. They both played well in their debuts, but there weren't any major moves. Calgary held on to Markstrom. Saros stayed put in Nashville. So as far as the goalie market goes, nothing big. I mean, hopefully these goalies the Devils got can carry them to the playoffs. They're out of reach, but they're not out of reach because the Metro's so competitive. So we'll see where that goes.
So I want to talk about Colorado. Colorado right now is on a 5-game win streak. Last time we spoke, you felt really good about Vancouver. You felt really good about Edmonton. We talked a little bit about McKinnon and his chance to win MVP this season. And this team's really starting to get it going. Do you think they're the favorite right now in the West? And then also we got to talk about Winnipeg. We got to talk about Dallas. Vegas gets much better at the deadline. So out of all of these, top teams in the West right now, who do you think is the scariest?
Vegas, 100%. Vegas is loaded. But again, you can never count out Colorado as long as they stay healthy. They've got a good core. Everybody on that team can score. They got solid goaltending, which is probably the most important thing when you have everything else. So Colorado's still up there. And then Edmonton, as long as their goalies can keep playing at the level they're playing right now, which is slightly above average, the rest of that team has the ability to carry them. So those probably the 3 top contenders. I still personally like Vancouver. I still think they're going to do it. But, I mean, the West, it could be anybody. There's so many options.
Would you say, in your opinion, do you think the Eastern Conference, like the leaders at the Eastern Conference, it's more of like top heavy, and then in the Western Conference, it's kind of, you got like 5 or 6 teams who can make some noise. Well, it's in the East, it's very top heavy with, Florida, Boston, the Rangers, Carolina, these teams.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can narrow it down to 4 or less out of the East. You know which teams have the ability to make the run. If it was to end right now, the regular season's over, we're starting the playoffs right now, I think it's going to be Florida and the Rangers in the final the Eastern Conference final. But outside of that, in the West, like, I think Dallas, out of all the teams I talked about earlier, probably has the least chance to make it, and Dallas is still a really good team. So the West is definitely the conference you don't want to be playing in if you want to make a Stanley Cup final. The East, 3 or 4 teams tops.
When you look at a team like the Boston Bruins, who right now they got 93 points. They're just a point out of Florida Panthers. They're just a point behind the Florida Panthers, who you like in the Eastern Conference a lot. They have 15 overtime losses. So that's 15 times where they were that close to getting an additional point. Is there something to be said for that when it comes to the Bruins? Because once we get to the playoffs, you go to overtime. We don't have, 3-on-3 hockey anymore. It's going to be, the full lines out on the ice. Is that something to think about with the Bruins, that, they're a lot better than even what the record says right now?
When it comes to the Bruins, outside of Pasternak, they don't have that elite scoring touch and speed to keep up with 3-on-3. So when it comes time to the playoffs, 3-on-3 is gone. Boston has a very good defensive core. So I think when it comes to overtime in the playoffs, they'll be much better off. So I wouldn't worry too much about their overtime losses in the regular season for now.
Right. That's the point I'm trying to make is they're really much better team than what we even look at in the roster because they're not a skill-based team, like you said, defensive core, and it's just going to look a lot different once those playoff situations come in overtime. But besides that, Toronto Maple Leafs, are we kind of seeing like the same trajectory as always, is where they're kind of fading into like that tier 2 team in the East where it could result in an early exit in the playoffs? Are you seeing that again with the Maple Leafs?
I mean, we're not seeing it, but the possibility is always there. It seems like they're cursed. It seems like Matthews has really stepped up his game. I mean, he's on pace for over 60 goals. So as of right now, they're gunning for it, but it seems like every time, as soon as the playoffs hit, they flip the switch in the opposite direction and they just seem to fold. So we'll see what happens, but it's tough to figure out how Toronto's going to go.
Toronto is 7-3 in their last 10. And then another team that's really heating up that we kind of skipped over in the West is the Edmonton Oilers, who are 7-2-1 now in their last 10. Them and Colorado are really getting going. And then Nashville, another team that's really starting to make some noise. So like you mentioned earlier with the Western Conference, kind of like who the hell knows? Mm-hmm. That just adds to the point where I cannot fucking wait until these NHL playoffs start, because it's just going to be every single matchup down the line in the Western Conference. It's going to be a battle, and we don't know what the hell is going to happen because there's just a boatload of these teams right now. You're going to have 8 teams that are really going to be going at it and competing. So I'm very excited for that. Tyler, any questions that you had for Adam on the latest in the NHL?
No, I just want to say go Dallas. Go Dallas.
6 goals, baby. 6 goals.
Who was playing?
Kinglemeyer is on fire since Ruff got fired. It's amazing how much difference coaching makes. He wasn't playing him on the right wing. He finally puts him, or the new coach finally puts him on the right wing. He's got like 12 points in 10 games. He's scoring all over the place. Still shouldn't have beat Dallas, though. Much better team, but, any given night.
You seem a lot more optimistic today than the last time we spoke with you. What are the Devils' chances getting into the postseason?
Not very good. I think Vegas has their odds at like less than 10%. I think it was too little, too late. They traded some pieces. There is a chance we got some guys heating up. They could potentially squeak in. They're only 4 points out of the wild card spot, but I'm more so excited because this is kind of Travis Green's auditioning period as the new coach, and I like his coaching style. So I think as long as we finish out the regular season decent, even if we don't make the playoffs, he'll be a good candidate for our coach next year, which is what I'm looking forward to the most.
What NHL organization right now has the ugliest future in sight?
Oh boy, Pittsburgh, probably. That's I hate to tell you, Pat.
Just what Pat wanted to hear.
It's not pretty. Sidney Crosby's finally voicing his mind, and he's one of the most soft-spoken team guy ever, and he needs to get out of there. And you lost Gensel. There's just not much future going on there. I think it's going to be a total rebuild instead of a retooling. Dallas is a good candidate for a retooling once Ben and Sagan and all them go, but I think Pittsburgh's the worst off. Besides the usual dumpster fire teams like Arizona and Columbus and all them.
Yeah, it's been awful. I mean, the day before they traded Gensel last Thursday, they lost to the Capitals 6-0. So I mean, after that, the writing's on the wall. These guys are getting moved after that. Like, you come out with that kind of effort against the Capitals, it's not like the old Capitals. I mean, you get beat by 6, you get beat 6-0 at home. And then after they move Gensel, they go out and lose 5-1. They go out and lose 4-0. They go out and lose 2-1. And then they beat the Sharks. I mean, good for them. They beat the San Jose Sharks. Doesn't mean anything. And right now, as we speak, we're losing to the Rangers. So it'll probably be another loss. It's just a mess.
That game just started.
Yeah, sad to see Crosby have to deal with this. And what makes it like hurt even more. It's one thing if he's washed up and he has to deal with this, but the fact that he still could provide like his services to on a winning team that has a chance, and we're just not even close. It's just not even close right now in Pittsburgh. I can understand your answer on that. Want to talk a little bit with you because we haven't brought this up yet. How's the draft class of this next NHL draft looking?
Not as deep as last year for sure. Bedard and Mitchkov and Fantilli, like it was just loaded last year, so it's not as deep. I'm trying to think how to say this. I don't want to say it wrong, but I think Macklin Celebrini, I think he's the consensus number 1 overall pick, but not as deep, but still deep, forward heavy. A lot less defensemen coming out this year. Goalies are going to be a premium this year. A lot of Swedes, so it's looking good, but we'll see. As we get closer, there'll be more reports coming out, especially as we get deeper into the college season.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on, checking in with us on the NHL trade deadline and also the latest what's going on. Things are only starting to heat up more and more as we get closer to the NHL postseason. So looking forward to having you back on as we get closer and closer to that. Adam, appreciate you coming on again. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Peace.
Once again, I want to thank Adam for coming on, talking some hockey with the boys. Can't wait to have him back on. Can't wait. We got NHL playoffs coming up, NBA playoffs right around the corner. We got March Madness coming up next week. Great time of the year. Great time of this break from football. This is the peak of that right now. And then baseball is coming on too. So all those things we will be talking about coming up shortly. Want to thank y'all for listening today. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Follow along with your boys, the New Score Podcast. We will see you next time. Goodbye.
Peace.
When I come to your city, I'm a new score. Broke your high score soon as I step through the door. Tryna stack my paper up like a bookstore. Money kissing each other like a rock and roll tour. When I come to your city, I'm a new score. Broke your high score soon as I step through the door. Tryna stack my paper up like a bookstore. Money kissing